This is the National Desk, America's News Now. Funds running low, how soon the U.S. could run out of money for Medicare and Social Security. And criminal trial coming soon, when the president's son will face a judge for his federal gun indictment. Plus, curbing illegal migration, the step the Biden administration is expected to take on asylum. From the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thanks for joining us. On this Weekend Edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week, and we look ahead at what to expect, starting with the four big stories we've been following this week. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis could soon be disqualified from former President Donald Trump's election interference case in Georgia. The state court of appeals now expected to decide if she can stay on. An American soldier has now been arrested in Russia accused of theft. And the former interpreter for MLB player Shohei Ohtani has agreed to plead guilty to federal charges. This is related to the nearly $17 million he stole from the Dodgers star. And Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's efforts to oust House Speaker Mike Johnson fails. The future of Social Security and Medicare is completely up in the air, according to new reports from the program's trustees. They warn a lack of action from Washington could result in retirees seeing their benefits slashed. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar explains.
Part of every paycheck goes to fund programs you expect to be there for you one day. Guaranteed health care and income when you retire. That's no longer a guarantee.
The government's two largest and arguably most important programs, certainly for seniors, are headed towards insolvency.
Annual reports from Medicare and Social Security trustees estimate Medicare Part A will start running out of money in 12 years, when today's 53-year-olds retire and the current youngest beneficiaries turn 77. As for Social Security, full benefits cannot be guaranteed to future and current retirees by 2033. Disability insurance is expected to see cuts in 2035. These are slight improvements from last year's estimates, thanks to fewer disability claims and stronger than expected economic growth.
We're running out of time to deal with this. If we wait until the early 2030s to try to deal with it, the game is long over.
Charles Blahhouse, a former public trustee of Social Security and Medicare, says the U.S. got into this mess through decades of creating and increasing benefits without finding ways to pay for it.
I think it's fair to say this is a severe abdication of responsibility to the public.
So how does Washington fix this? There are a few options. None of them are painless.
There's probably going to need to be a combination of slowing the growth of benefits for higher income earners, raising the payroll tax cap and getting more revenues to the program, adjusting some of the calculations we have for the benefits, and raising the retirement age for younger workers.
Now, the leading presidential candidates really don't spend much time at all on this issue. It's obviously politically unpopular to talk about doing any of those things. However, we do know President Biden supports tax increases on the wealthy and allowing the government to negotiate drug prices. As for former President Trump, well, he recently said in an interview that he would not make cuts to the programs, but while he was in office, his budget proposals did include cuts.
If nothing is done, Atra, and these latest projections pan out, how big would benefit cuts be?
Well, it would hurt. There's no way around it. In 9 years, Social Security beneficiaries would see a more than 20% across the board cut. In 2035, those on disability insurance would see a 17% cut. And as for Medicare Part A, the current deficit trajectory would initiate an 11% cut in payments. And this would no doubt cause major disruptions to healthcare services.
Huge impact there. Atra El-Nashar reporting tonight from the Capitol. Thank you.
TikTok is suing the U.S. government over a law that could force a nationwide ban of the video sharing app. The legislation was included in a key foreign aid package signed by President Biden last month. It gives the app's Chinese parent company ByteDance 9 months to sell TikTok, or it will be restricted from U.S. app stores. The law comes as there are concerns that China could use the app to collect user data for espionage operations. TikTok and ByteDance say the law is unconstitutional because it infringes on free speech. On Capitol Hill, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene was booed on the House floor after she brought forth a motion to oust Speaker Mike Johnson on Wednesday.
Declaring the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives to be vacant.
Both Democrats and Republicans blocked the motion, which only earned 11 votes. The action effectively shut down the Congresswoman's months-long campaign to end Johnson's speakership. A Georgia appeals court will now consider former President Trump's effort to disqualify the district attorney in the Georgia election interference case. It will now hear an appeal to a previous ruling that allowed DA Fani Willis to continue prosecuting the case. This comes after Trump tried to get her removed from the case back in March. He claimed her romantic relationship with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade creates a conflict of interest. A judge allowed her to stay on the case, and Wade stepped down. A new poll in the battleground state of Wisconsin finds President Biden leading former President Trump. According to Quinnipiac, Biden would earn 50% of the vote, while Trump would get 44% in a head-to-head matchup. When third-party and independent candidates are included, the two candidates are roughly tied. President Biden might be in a race to Trump-proof his legacy, according to new reporting from Politico. Of the $1.1 trillion attached to the American Rescue Plan, Infrastructure Law, CHIPS Act, and Inflation Reduction Act, less than 17% has been spent as of April. If reelected, former President Trump claims he has the authority to claw back congressionally appropriated funds he deems wasteful, despite the law saying otherwise. Kids are playing a sizable role in today's activism movement. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins joins us with a look at that phenomenon from Washington.
Many of the recent headline-grabbing anti-Israel protests across the country have one thing in common: crowds of passionate young people. In recent years, kids have proved to be effective activists. The students of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School became powerful gun control advocates after 17 of their classmates were slaughtered in a mass shooting.
David has become an icon of the Children's Crusade.
I'm trying to be an activist.
One of the world's most famous climate activists, Greta Thunberg, made her mark on the world as a teen.
How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood.
Nicole Neely, the president of Parents Defending Education, explained why these voices are so powerful.
I think it's really hard to attack kids, quite honestly. If an adult were to criticize them, then you look like you're mean, you're a bully, you're unkind.
Kids are apparently so effective at pushing causes. The Free Press reports a group in California pays public high school kids $1,400 each to learn how to fight for racial and social justice. Another nonprofit, Our Children's Trust, recruits kids as young as 8 to use as plaintiffs in climate lawsuits. They didn't respond to our requests for comment.
It's almost using children as human shields, right? It's enlisting kids in this kind of activism. Well, these kids don't know what they're saying. They're just trying to please the authority figures and the teachers in their lives. And that, to me, is something that's really despicable.
Professional activist organizations are also heavily involved in supporting the current anti-Israel protest on campus. A closer look shows some young activists struggle to grasp exactly what they're marching and yelling for.
Is there something that NYU's doing?
I really don't know. I'm pretty sure they're... Do you know what NYU's doing? About what? About Israel. Why are we protesting here?
We'll be free.
I wish I was more educated.
Ivy League schools like Columbia have long prided themselves on valuing student activism and encouraging it, leading critics to now say these colleges are reaping what they sowed. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
College protests are all over the news, but a recent poll suggests only a sliver of students see the Israel-Hamas war as their top issue in 2024. According to a Generation Lab survey, healthcare is the top issue on most students' minds. That's followed by educational funding, economic issues, racial justice, and climate change. Just 13% said the Israel-Hamas war is the most important issue to them. Developing now, a U.S. soldier jailed in Russia accused of theft. He has been identified as Sergeant Gordon Black. He will now be detained for 2 months. We're learning he didn't have authorization from the Department of Defense to be in Russia. He also didn't request official clearance prior to leaving his unit in South Korea roughly a month ago. An official with the Russian Foreign Ministry says his detention will last until July 2nd. The Biden administration could soon crack down on illegal migration. A rule change is expected to enter a public comment period soon. It would let immigration officials quickly deny asylum claims from migrants who are ineligible for the protection. The president has been under pressure to take executive action on border security. Moderate Democrats are now joining their Republican colleagues on that request. The current rate for a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage is 7.09%, down from a peak of 8% in October, but much higher than the 3% range we saw a few years ago. Remember when people rushed to get homes during the pandemic? I'm with Courtney from the Fact Check team. How common are these kinds of mortgages?
They are the most common, Dee Dee. In fact, I looked into it, and according to Freddie Mac, 90% of American homeowners choose a 30-year fixed mortgage because of pros like low monthly payments, flexibility with those payments, and locked-in rates for 30 years.
But many don't realize how unusual this option is.
That's exactly right. The U.S. is actually the only country in the world where the 30-year fixed rate is the most popular way to buy a house. That's thanks to government policy. Now, for context, Congress officially authorized the 30-year mortgage back in 1948. Specifically, government-sponsored agencies Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac buy mortgages from lenders, giving the lenders more capital to make more loans and ensuring they can continue offering those loans at little risk to themselves.
All right, Courtney, thank you. Stick around. Courtney will be back with a look at mortgage options in other countries. Right now, the FAA is investigating whether Boeing failed to perform some inspections on 787 Dreamliner jets. The probe follows several others this year after a mid-air blowout on an Alaska Airlines flight sparked safety concerns. The FAA says Boeing voluntarily notified the agency last month about the inspections. The company is re-inspecting all 787 planes within its fleet and creating a plan to address its in-service fleet. Coming up next here on the National Desk, cracking down the approach lawmakers are taking to combat anti-Semitism in the country. And a new approach, the success Norway says it's seen after banning cell phones in school. Earlier this week, leaders from New York City Public Schools, the Berkeley Unified School District in California, and Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland joined on Capitol Hill Wednesday, where they strongly denied allegations that they let anti-Semitism run rampant in their schools. This comes after a wave of pro-Palestinian student protests have been held across dozens of universities and a growing number of high schools.
It was the first such hearing faced by school district leaders on the rapid rise in anti-Semitic incidents across the country. Joining me now, Political Director of Parents Defending Education, Alex Nestor. Alex, let's get right into this. At the hearing today, leaders of the three districts, they pushed back on the charges made against them of tolerating anti-Semitism. Was there any way you think of doing things differently than what they said they did?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there was a lot of, moving around, walking around the incident, walking around the real issues of what actually happened in these school districts. We know in each case there were students chanting death to the Jews, bring back Hitler, these insanely disgusting comments. And, in some cases, like in New York City with Chancellor Banks, it does look like he disciplined some kids there. In other cases, we're not entirely sure. So, there were a lot of mealy-mouthed sort of statements there and, unclear as to exactly the amount of action that's been taken to address the rise in anti-Semitism in our schools.
On that point, David Banks blamed Congress for not doing enough to fight anti-Semitism. What is your take on that?
I mean, look, this is a problem. It's going to be a problem for, unfortunately, a while until we root out some of the main causes here, and that includes pushing DEI in K-12 schools. Any sort of curriculum, any sort of lesson that teaches people to separate one another by race is going to result in this type of very disgusting thinking. Including anti-Semitism. So it's a problem at the school district level. It's certainly a problem that Congress could do more to address, and I think this hearing was a step in the right direction there, but it's a problem that we all need to address at all levels, and frankly, I think that's kind of pushing the blame off of himself as a school district leader and putting it on someone else when he could be driving the conversation.
Pro-Israel Jewish organizations in their civil rights complaints against school districts, they have asked to officially adopt a wider definition for anti-Semitism. Do you think, will this lead to increased discrimination?
And I think, look, I think adopting this definition of anti-Semitism would be a good thing for school districts. It's good to, again, address this head on. I think in terms of the rise in anti-Semitic incidents, I'm not sure if that's going to change if you actually call something what it is. And look, whether we're talking behavior, one-on-one incidents between kids, whether we're talking these walkouts, something has to be done here. And whether it's passing a new policy or what have you, kids should be disciplined for this, and the adults in the room who let it happen also need to face discipline.
Alex Nestor, thank you for joining us tonight on the National Desk.
Thanks for having me.
Many students in Norway are seeing better grades and improved health thanks to a cell phone ban in schools, according to a new study. The National Desk, Janae Bowens, joins us now with a closer look at the results.
Norway might be onto something.
When they come, they lock in their mobiles, and when they leave, they can bring it.
They've essentially banned students from having smartphones and tablets in schools. Their prime minister says the kids love it.
They say that, we start to play in the breaks. The girls say, we take a shower after the gym. We are not afraid anymore to be photographed. And there's a completely different social interaction.
And a study from Sarah Abrahamson, a postdoctoral fellow at the Norwegian Institute of Public Health, found that smartphone bans helped reduce the girls' need to see a psychological specialist for mental health issues by almost 60%, and it helped to improve their GPAs. Girls also experienced a 46% drop in bullying, and boys saw a 43% decrease.
The old new adage, if you won't say it to someone's face, then you shouldn't say it through a device, a text message, or a snap, or any of the above. But unfortunately, people feel too free to just express themselves and say what they want.
Mental health expert with JustAnswer.com and mom, Jennifer Kalman, already limits her twins' cell phone and social media use. She'd like to see what's being implemented in Norway here in the U.S.
We don't just hand our children drugs, yet we hand them a cell phone with free reign, and it does the same things to the brain as drugs do, but we don't think of limiting it. Even when we see the harmful effects, I would say that we should do a better job managing our FOMO, fear of missing out, and put some limits and controls on things so that our kids aren't suffering.
According to government data, 77% of U.S. schools say they prohibit cell phones for non-academic use, but advocates are calling for cell phone bans during the entire school day, just like Norway. I'm Janae Bowens reporting.
Coming up next, a new trend what scammers are now turning to that's easier for them and harder for you to get your money. The National Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in South Carolina, where the community came together to march for some of their youngest community members.
Dozens of Horry County community members showed up to Broadway at the beach Saturday to march for babies.
We come out today to celebrate because we're fighting for the health of moms and babies.
March for Dimes was founded in 1938 with the mission to improve mom and baby health across the U.S. through research, advocacy, and education. Conway couple Janisha and Jerry Johnson are this year's ambassador family. Their son, Jerry III, or Wormy, was born weighing 1 pound and 4 ounces.
So we are walking just for families who can't walk, who may have lost their children or still in the NICU. And so we want to walk for them because our child is a miracle, and we're just believing for other families that they'll have the same miracle.
The Johnsons say you would never know their son struggled to stay alive in the NICU for more than 4 months. The family cheered as Jerry III crossed the finish line with his parents, marking another momentous moment for the Johnsons.
To Providence, Rhode Island, where cybersecurity experts are now seeing a surge in push payment scams. These sorts of payments done on apps like Venmo or Zelle are appealing to scammers because of speed.
A lot of these transfers happen immediately, and the transfers are automatic. In other words, they're tough to claw back. It's coming directly out of an account or directly out of your bank account. So for the payer to get that money back, it's really difficult.
Driscoll says if somebody's pushing you to get something done fast, make sure you understand why that needs to be an urgent transaction. In West Palm Beach, Florida, a gastroenterologist now reporting a troubling rise in liver disease, especially among young adults, linked to drinking. According to this doctor, more people under the age of 30 now require liver transplants.
People don't realize that they're causing liver damage until it may be too late, because in the initial stages, there are no symptoms, but all alcohol is toxic to the liver.
Olson says lifestyle changes like exercise and a healthy diet will help slow down further liver damage. Coming up next, the world's largest vacuum has now been put to use. We'll explain how it's helping the fight against pollution.
Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now. Changes could be on the way for Nashville following country superstar Morgan Wallen's chair-throwing incident. The city's mayor says the city will see if it winds up making recommendations to the Metro Historic Zoning Commission. And an American Airlines flight reportedly turned around 2 hours in after a passenger reportedly called a flight attendant a waiter. It happened on a flight en route to Guyana from New York last July. The estranged wife of a South Carolina pastor who died by suicide accused him of grooming her at church. Micah Miller was found dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound on April 27th. Those stories and much more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. The former interpreter for Major League Baseball star Shohei Ohtani has agreed to plead guilty to stealing $17 million from the Dodgers star. The Department of Justice says Ippei Mitsuhara is expected to enter a guilty plea on 1 count of bank fraud and 1 count of subscribing to a false tax return. The DOJ says Mitsuhara allegedly stole from Ohtani to, quote, finance his voracious appetite for illegal sports betting. He then lied to the IRS about his income. Mitsuhara has an arraignment on Tuesday. He faces up to 33 years in federal prison. $123 million. That's how much money in damages the Texas Panhandle suffered in the Smokehouse Creek and Windy Deuce fires earlier this year, making them the costliest in state history. That figure is according to Texas A&M AgriLife. About $68 million is estimated to be the amount of damages to ranch infrastructure. That includes the deaths of more than 12,000 cattle.
That's a lot of cattle and a lot of loss, and a lot of those guys, they'll have help from their friends and other ranchers, you know, to help them along. And
officials say the cost associated with damages is expected to rise. The world's largest vacuum now at work in Iceland. The Swiss company Climeworks says the mammoth is designed to suck planet-heating pollution. It says it's able to pull 36,000 tons of carbon from the atmosphere at full capacity. That carbon will then be transported underground, where it will be naturally transformed into stone. Coming up next year on the National Desk, ramping up the fight. The new guidance the CDC is issuing as it tries to stop the spread of the bird flu. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back.
This is the National Desk, America's News Now.
Coming up, following the money, new evidence shines light on who may be behind some college protests. Baby Boom, the popular weight loss drug that has now been linked to surprise pregnancies. A big decision, the abortion measure on the ballot this November in Florida. From the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News. Now, I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we'll get straight to it. Developing right now, we are taking a closer look at the claim there's been outside involvement in some of the campus protests. There is new evidence that while the protests started organically, they've been able to grow and spread rapidly due to outside funding and support, including from foreign entities. Here's national correspondent Christine Frizzell.
The vast majority of those taking part in protests on college campuses have voiced frustration with U.S. policy supporting Israel and its war in Gaza.
I don't want my money or tuition money to go towards war and killing people.
But there's new evidence their ire has been turned into fire, fueled by groups that help them organize and grow. New York City police revealed they have evidence of outside agitators at Columbia's protest with no connection to the university.
These external actors are obviously not students. It is our belief they are now actively co-opting what should be a peaceful gathering.
Politico reporting on outside groups supporting the protests funded by wealthy donors like George Soros. But others say there is another, more concerning trend, the active involvement of groups who get their funding from the Chinese Communist Party.
Lie. Israel is not a racist state.
Code Pink is one example. The New York Times reporting the American billionaire Roy Singham has spent years and millions of dollars promoting the Chinese Communist Party and is married to Code Pink co-founder Jody Evans.
Part of China's strategy towards the United States overall is to sort of divide the country, to encourage conflict and division, because they believe that it saps the United States of its energy to be able to operate internationally.
Another group funded by Singham is the People's Forum, with members actively involved in the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which has posted photos from campus protests all around the country. Schweitzer says the same group helped radicalize the racial justice protests of 2020, which started when George Floyd was murdered by a police officer.
A lot of people were out expressing their opinions about wanting perhaps some police reform or wanting some changes. These organizations took it to the extreme. All police officers are racist. We need to abolish the police.
There have already been calls for the federal government to investigate the role of external factors in these campus protests, with some lawmakers here on Capitol Hill signaling they'd be open to it. In Washington, I'm Christine Frizzell.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is now serving his 5th term in office. This new 6-year-long term began on Tuesday, and it means the 71-year-old will be in office until 2030. Putin is already the longest-serving Kremlin leader since Joseph Stalin. This term comes among Russia's ongoing invasion of neighboring Ukraine. Ukraine says it foiled a Russian plot to assassinate President Vladimir Zelensky. The Ukrainian Security Service arrested 2 of its colonels on suspicion of treason after investigators found they developed a plot as a gift to Putin for his inauguration. The colonels were recruited before Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Zelensky says there have been at least 10 attempts to assassinate him since the war began. In Florida, abortion is shaping up to be a key election year issue. This, as the state's new 6-week ban is in effect. It does allow exceptions for rape, incest, and life-threatening conditions for the mother. Democratic Congresswoman Lois Frankel is pushing for an amendment that would guarantee access to an abortion before the fetus is viable. Voters will decide in November.
We have an amendment on the Florida Constitution, which will require 60% passage. That would restore, really bring the Roe v. Wade rights back to Floridians.
Florida's Republican-controlled legislature passed a 6-week ban, and it was signed by Governor Ron DeSantis. The state Supreme Court upheld the ban, but allowed the ballot measure to go forward. A measure to ban the sale and transfer of semi-automatic firearms failed to pass Colorado's Democratic-controlled legislature on Tuesday. The Colorado House passed the ban in a historic first after roughly the same bill was swiftly nixed last year. Some Senate Democrats say more conversations need to be had outside of the Capitol in order to save more lives from gun violence. Several other gun control proposals are nearing passage this year, including a bill to put a measure on the 2024 November ballot to tax the sale of guns and ammunition. The proposal is expected to be revived next year. The CDC is now recommending personal protective equipment for livestock workers to fight the spread of bird flu. The agency wants state health departments to work with farms and slaughterhouses to distribute PPE, prioritizing places where cows have been confirmed to have been infected. At least one livestock worker in Texas has been infected with bird flu. The CDC says the risk to the general public remains low. Ozempic babies. That's the headline that's flooding social media. Researchers say the drugs have been shown to increase a woman's chance of getting pregnant. That's because weight loss is generally associated with increased fertility. There are a few studies available on safety during pregnancy, but more research is being done. For now, doctors recommend that women stop taking the drugs 2 months before they try to get pregnant. Keeping an eye on your money, the IRS says the deadline to claim more than $1 billion in tax refunds is about to expire. May 17th is the deadline for those who failed to file their 2020 return if they want a refund. Normally, the filing deadline to claim a refund is 3 years, but in 2020, tax day was pushed back to May 17th due to the pandemic. Time is ticking for Americans to get a real ID. Beginning May 7, 2025, you'll need a real ID, which is an enhanced license to board a domestic flight, cross the border, or enter a federal building. The move comes after the 9/11 attacks, when the federal government set new security standards to obtain a state-issued driver's license and ID card. Most designs have a star on the top right corner. The Biden administration is looking into credit card and airline reward programs. The Department of Transportation and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau questioned industry leaders on Thursday. They say there's more than 500 million credit cards in circulation across the country. Many come with signing bonuses or perks. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg says they want to make sure people are getting what's promised.
Point systems like frequent flyer miles and credit card rewards have become a meaningful part of our economy. For many Americans, point balances are significant enough that they amount to part of our savings, and reward offers are enticing enough that they significantly shape how customers interact with airlines and credit card companies.
Buttigieg says they are concerned about the impact rewards programs have on competition and market behavior. The hearing is part of the Biden administration's effort to take on so-called junk fees. Getting illicit pills is just as easy as getting food with a delivery app. That's what the DEA told Congress earlier this week. The National Desk Jeff Harris is talking with experts to find out why.
All it takes is a few taps on a smartphone and pills will be at your front door. That's what the DEA just told a House Appropriations Subcommittee. Now, the agency is asking Congress for more money to fight Mexican drug cartels, but that fight has now spread online.
People know what to state that they're ordering and have the language or the emojis that they use for coding for that.
You contact them and send them your credit card number and they send you some drug.
According to the DEA, it's like buying food from Uber Eats. But instead of a burger and fries, people are now using everyday technology to buy illicit pills like gaming systems.
They are using these platforms where they can, Xbox and other gaming platforms where they can communicate, and it's difficult to track.
A professor of public health at Syracuse University, Dessa Bergensico, tells us at a recent international drug trafficking conference she attended, they spoke in depth about allocating resources online.
Really becoming experts in terms of AI and the dark web and the gaming platforms and the technologies that people are using.
Because without that insight, stopping drugs like fentanyl from being sold online and getting into the United States could prove to be an even bigger challenge than it already is.
But the people you're trying to defeat are becoming more and more sophisticated all the time as well. So that makes it harder.
The DEA says 22 American teenagers die every week because of illegal drug use. With the money they're requesting, they want to send 13 agents and also intel analysts to Mexico to help fight the growing problem. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
Disgraced Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein will remain jailed in New York as he awaits his retrial in his 2020 rape case that was thrown out last month. Prosecutors in California wanted him back to serve his 16-year sentence for a separate rape conviction. However, Weinstein denied his consent for extradition on Thursday. His legal team argues he should be in New York so he could prepare for his retrial and get the medical care he needs. President Biden's son Hunter will likely have his criminal trial in Delaware next month. This after a federal appeals court refused to throw out his federal gun indictment on Thursday. Prosecutors say Hunter bought and possessed a revolver in 2018. They claim that violated federal law because he was using illicit drugs at the time. The president's son had asked the Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals to dismiss the charges, but they rejected his appeal. A 30-year fixed-rate mortgage has an interest rate that remains the same for the life of the loan. I'm back with Courtney from the Fact Check team. How is this different than in other countries?
Well, a 30-year fixed rate is unique to the U.S. because it combines the attributes of a long-term mortgage and a fixed-rate loan. It's typically one or the other. For example, Canada offers both variable and fixed-rate mortgages, but there are no 30-year fixed-rate mortgages. What is offered, though, is a fixed-rate 5-year mortgage that is paid off over 25 years, but gets refinanced every 5 years or so. And in the UK, the most common are 2 or 5-year fixed-rate mortgages that will then move on to the lender's standard variable interest rate at the end of the fixed time period. But since those are typically more expensive, homeowners often choose to refinance their properties.
That's really interesting to see what's happening abroad. The 30-year fixed rate is popular because of government entities, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. Do other countries have anything similar?
Yes, but only a few offer the same type of government assistance that the U.S. does. Canada and the Netherlands have government mortgage insurers like the U.S. Federal Housing Administration. Canada and Japan offer specific government security guarantee programs like Ginnie Mae. And Japan and Korea offer assistance through government-sponsored mortgage enterprises like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. It is important to note, though, that other countries do provide some type of government support, just not the same support. Instead, they rely on banks and other deposit-taking institutions.
All right, Courtney, thank you. And for more on this Fact Check team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com. Still to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from who could be behind the protests on college campuses to kids being used for political protests.
Welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, reporting on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. Our team of correspondents is here to share their insights on the stories they've been covering. President Biden saying this past week that he will halt some military aid to Israel if they proceed with an offensive on the Palestinian city of Rafah. National correspondent Matt Galka, walk us through Biden's decision and the political fallout.
Yeah, Steve, well, you know, in the wake of this, for Republicans, this is a no-brainer. They're pouncing. Congressional leaders are demanding to get the details on how the president came to this decision to delay weapons shipments to Israel. And for other Republicans, they're saying the fact that weapons could be delayed to one of our allies, that is a pro-Hamas deal. Now, for Democrats, the political fallout a lot more tricky. Progressives celebrating this, think of like Senator Bernie Sanders in Vermont, who's saying this is a good start, but it hasn't gone far enough. He's been a big critic of the Israel-Gaza war. But for other pro-Israel Democrats, this is very tricky for them because some of them say this is undermining the relationship that America has with Israel. It's undermining being an ally to one of the only countries in the Middle East that we can count on in a decades-long partnership. So all of that just underscores how politically tricky the Israel-Gaza war is for the president and his base, especially in an election year.
Right, an issue that's not going away anytime soon. Meanwhile, pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel protests continuing across the U.S. National correspondent Christine Frizzell, you talked to one expert who says he has evidence that a surprising foreign adversary is connected to some of the protesters.
Yeah, the expert I spoke to is Peter Schweitzer. He wrote a whole book on the influence of China in the United States. He lists things in his book about their role in the fentanyl crisis, but also goes into detail about their role sort of funding causes that create fissures in the United States. So think about the debate over transgender rights. Obviously, this is a real debate here, but forces associated with the Chinese Communist Party have put money and support into furthering the debate and making it even more extreme, especially on social media. That happened in 2020 with the social justice protests. You know, remember, a lot of people were very angry with the death of George Floyd, but all of a sudden we started hearing things like defund the police. Well, Schweitzer says that this is what we're seeing with campus protests, who were visibly frustrated with U.S. policy, with its support for Israel, its war in Gaza, but taking it to the next level, making it more extreme, encouraging protesters to take over buildings. We heard this from Mayor Eric Adams as well in New York City, sort of screaming from the rooftops about how these outside groups have infiltrated and co-opted what were very peaceful protests. There's been a lot of reporting on domestic groups funding this, but when you start to hear about the Chinese Communist Party, especially this actually American billionaire Roy Singham, who works closely with the Chinese Communist Party, putting money into groups like Code Pink and the Party for Socialism and Liberation, funding these groups that would then are ending up at all these protests. It is concerning. And, you know, what Schweitzer says is American people just need to know that this is happening.
Right, and it's an issue that U.S. officials have brought up with Chinese officials, too, in terms of the Chinese government meddling, so to speak, in American politics. And speaking of protests, political protests, national correspondent Kayla Gaskin's critics are slamming a group they say is recruiting young kids to be on the front lines of controversial political protests. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So, Steve, this is all brought to light by looking at the age of some of these anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian protesters that we've seen marching around the country. And it's brought attention to this issue of how young are these protesters, how young are these activists. And when you look at not just this issue with Israel-Palestine, but when you look at some of the other issues that are pretty hot right now, the age of those protesters and people that are getting involved in this activism is very young. So what you were just talking about is actually a group that represents children as young as 8 filing lawsuits for climate change. They represent kids 8 to 18. So, you know, it's hard to understand if an 8-year-old actually has a good idea of exactly what a lawsuit entails or what they're doing. So that's what critics are latching onto. And then you look at some of the other systems. There's a group out in California that actually pays kids $1,400 each to get training in social justice activism. So people are starting to notice a trend here, and that's because kids as activists have been pretty successful, pretty effective, especially recently. Think back to after the tragedy that happened at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, when those kids really mobilized teenagers and advocated for gun control. Their voices were loud and clear and heard all around the country, including here in Washington. And then when you go to the climate side, think about Greta Thunberg. She was just a teenager when she gave her famous speech at the UN and has since made a name for herself in that sphere. So what people are noticing is that when it comes to the Israel-Palestine stuff, they're starting to get younger and younger and younger and get these groups of kids involved. And we've seen some videos come out, Steve, that they don't exactly even know what they're marching or protesting for.
Kayla, Christine, Matt, as always, top-notch reporting. And as always, thank you for your hard work. Back to you.
Coming up next, turning to new tools. What fire crews in Utah will now have access to should a wildfire break out in the state. Plus, business owners fed up the punishment they're facing as there's a graffiti problem in the area. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We start in Saratoga Springs, Utah, where a major shift in technology that helps first responders to get alerts for wildfires is happening soon.
Utah is one of the most fire-prone states in the country. The Utah Division of Forestry, Fire and State Lands says the state averages up to 1,000 wildfires each year. It has 0 AI cameras to spot a fire.
How valuable are these pieces of technology to what you do and what you're looking for?
They can be super valuable when a known fire happens.
The state has 14 wildfire cameras running right now, but they're traditional cameras and need a person watching them.
How can we leverage technology in the best and most efficient way possible to be able to mitigate risk?
That changes soon. The state of Utah, like its western neighbors, will get 5 of those AI cameras. In California, there are already more than 1,000 of these AI cameras in forests all over the state. On a very basic level, the cameras detect smoke, then alert first responders.
Saigon Deli in the Chinatown International District is facing a graffiti problem.
The city, they want us to clean up all the graffiti on the building.
Kwok Deng, the owner of the business, says this letter was posted on their door by Seattle Public Utilities, stating that his business is a potential graffiti nuisance property based on the persistent graffiti on the building. And if he doesn't clean it up, he will be fined $100 a day or up to $5,000. But Deng tells me it's a cycle that seems never ending.
Sometimes every day, sometimes every week. We don't know, because we out of control. They do at night time, even on the daytime. We see it, we can do nothing.
Vandalism has been a constant problem in this area, which is why so many businesses have closed.
And I am very happy that this business has stayed here and seeing the, change over so many businesses that can't afford to continue staying here and the violence and different things along the street that have happened.
Wednesday around 3:30 in the morning, owners of Majesty Bible and Gifts were startled when their alarm system started going off. Someone had broken into their Bible store.
This has never happened. We've been open for 34 years, and this is the first time this has ever happened. So, there's something to celebrate about that.
As you could see in the security camera footage, the burglar broke through a window on the side of the store. They immediately walked over to the jewelry display and broke the glass with what looks like a mallet. They took all the jewelry they could grab and left.
You don't ever expect that kind of thing to happen. You hear about it, but it's different when it's, your store.
Cullen says the burglars stole $4,000 worth of rings, over $5,000 in necklaces and bracelets, and causing over $1,000 in display damage.
Still ahead, the stories making headlines next week, from 2 public officials in court to the 2024 Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show. Looking ahead to stories making headlines this week, jury selection is set to begin on Monday for the trial of New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez. He's accused of taking bribes in exchange for favors. And ex-Ohio House Speaker Larry Householder is set to be arraigned on Monday. He's facing 10 new felony counts. One of them could bar him from public office. This comes as he was convicted last June for his role in a $60 million bribery scheme. The 2024 Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show will soon be underway. The highly coveted Best in Show prize will be announced on Tuesday. Can't wait. That'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National Desk, America's News. Now, don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check our local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, have a great week.